Hi, I'm Dee Pixel Quilts, and I'm here to give you a quick intro on how you can make the best pixel quilt that you can, and also how to avoid the three top pitfalls I see people making mistakes with. So, if you didn't know, I have the ability to create pixel quilts on my website. So, I have built a system that means you can go in and upload your own photos. So, I'm just going to walk you through that now, and then I'll talk you through the things that you should be looking out for and perhaps the things you should be avoiding as well. Let's go. So, this is the website, this is the front page, and you want to go into create your own pixel quilt. Once you click into that, it will ask you to register if you're not already registered, and if or I'm already logged in, but it will usually ask you to log in as well. So these are the terms and conditions you have to abide by when uploading your image. But when you're ready, let's pick an image. So I'm going to focus on this image because this is actually a pixel quilt I've already made. This is Vladimir Zelensky, and he is a really good example of some of the things that can go wrong when you're actually making a pixel quilt. So that first screen was where the photo uploads and you get to crop it. So after you have played around, don't always think that centering your images is going to produce the best outcome as well. So have a play. It takes it into a screen, and this is where the magic happens. So when it brings it up in here, it's going to default into Kona cotton fabrics. So all of these fabrics right here, all of these colors and shades, these are all Kona color shades of fabric. The other defaults that it will default to is that it will give it a high level of detail from the start, and it will also produce a medium-sized quilt. Medium-sized quilt is the size of Posty, which is 72 by 54. If you wanted to go large, the large size is 92 by 74. So you can see the first pitfall I'm going to highlight is that a lot of people do not choose good images. So what makes a bad image? So on this one, I think what is creating a bad image is that there are some areas of shadows. If you're doing a face and you have any shadows in that face, that will immediately take detail out of that area, which you need. So try and choose a photo with no dark areas of shadows and also no really overexposed areas, because they were both things that will take detail out of the quilt that you need in it for the person to be recognizable. So we can have a play with this and see how we get on. The first thing I always do is I go ahead and try the image. It defaults to 14 colors. Let's see if taking the colors up to the maximum of 19 will help. Okay, so immediately that's kind of put some color into his face, and it's making it read a little bit better. After I've tried the colors, I'll quite often go in and think, okay, well, what about a different fabric line? Maybe a different fabric line will actually produce a better image. So there is also Michael Miller's Cotton Couture solid fabrics loaded on here, which doesn't look good. And then there are also Bella Solids loaded in here. So these are each of the things that if it doesn't come up perfect, first of all, which chances are like only probably one image in 20 that I put in, it will ever just come click like him. He clicked. These are the things you need to play around with. So I'm going to go back to Kona, which with more colors, it was reading better. But the other thing that I really struggle with pixel quilts is whatever you put in, you will get out. So you can't put a bad quality image in and expect to get a good quality pixel quilt out of it. The other thing you need to look out for as well is that any kind of undertone in the skin is going to be represented in this. So if I was to put a picture of me in, I would have very red and purple undertones to my skin. And that's exactly what's happening to Zelinsky right now. You can see there's purple, pink areas, there's almost like a slight green area, all of which I don't like. And this is pitfall number 2. Like, when you can't stand back and be objective, because I think people get so overwhelmed when they put a picture of their loved one in here, and they're just so excited that you're no longer objective. So when you get to that point, or if you think you're at that point, that's when you need to either get somebody else's eye to look at it or take a little break. So I am not happy with the colors that are coming out on his face. And I think actually what is happening to him is that this background, this system can only pick the 19 most prominent colors and use those. So I think what's happening is we're taking some detail out of his face because so many colors are going into the background. So at this point, if an image isn't working, I would tell you, go ahead and take out the background of an image. Now I use this system, which is PicMonkey, and I pay monthly for this. They do a free option, but I don't think that includes the background removal. But you can, if you have an iPhone, you can remove the image in your iPhone as well. So I will go ahead and just use the remove background tool, and there he is. So I'm just going to make the background plain white, and then we can download him and try him again. Now my website does not have the function for you to save what you're working on until you purchase it. At the moment it's in its final testing phase, and so all of the patterns that you create, they're going to be half price, which is $15. But before you get to the point that you're happy with you want to pay the $15 for your pattern, what I advise you do, because you can't save it up until that point, is that you go ahead and open multiple versions, multiple tabs. So then you're able to go, okay, that's what he looks like that. Now let's upload him without a background and see if that helps at all. So I'll give you a quick intro here as well, in terms of, you can see here with me moving the box that it changes this little crop image here. So this is where you can actually start looking and start thinking, okay, do I want him in the center? Do I want him cropped in some more? Do I want it cropped more into his face? So this is where you just get to have a play. Before I get to the stage that I'm gonna decide on cropping, I'm just gonna make sure that hopefully this image works better than the previous one. So the previous one has got some background. It's not a background that's recognizable, so I don't necessarily think it's adding anything to the image, so I don't think removing it is a problem. So straight away, we've landed on the default 14 colors, and straight away it's looking better. So in order to get it to read like that on this, I had to whack it up to 19 colors, which means we're at 2600 pixels. If you look in the quilt statistics, it will give you an idea of how many pixels each quilt will entail. And I say, my general rule is, if for your first pixel quilt, and if you don't, because you don't know the process, you've not done it before, you might absolutely hate the process. If you keep it to 2500 pixels or below, then you're likely to finish, even if you really detest the process. So I like the fact that there's more detail on his face now. There are areas of shadow on this image that are kind of blocking out probably some of the details that we could have by choosing another image. But I think in terms of, I've made this quilt already, what I was trying to convey with this quilt and the heaviness, I didn't mind the shadows. This is one of the only quilts where I didn't mind the shadows. But what I do mind is the purple and the pinks and the greens. So at this point, this is where we get to start playing. There's color palettes here. So when it defaults, it will be full color. But then you can choose to have a look at it in grayscale. And I think It looks really good in grayscale. And then you can, there's a couple of pop art filters, like a pink filter and a blue filter. And then the last one at the bottom is called a warm filter. And what this does is it takes all of the pinks and the purples and the greens and the greys out of the image. So it won't let any in, and it will replace them with warm colors. So when you're working on a face and the undertones are really coming through and you don't want those pinks or purples in the image, this is an amazing filter that I use all of the time to get rid of them. So I think this is a really, really nice image. So ultimately, I'll go back to the beginning. With Zielinski, like I said, this is a quilt I have already made. And it was one that I had to create with quite a short deadline. So with him, knowing that he works with either the warm filter or the grayscale, now I'm going to choose to crop him in a way that's going to mean he's going to take me less time. When it comes to cropping faces, I mostly either crop them completely in half, or I will at least try and crop them with both eyes in, which is what I did with Zielinski. So I'll go ahead and crop him like that. I really liked this image as well in the grayscale because the way it read, I was finding a lot of images of him in a bulletproof vest, and I think I was getting a bit fixated that I wanted the image of him in a bulletproof vest. When you actually turn this into grayscale, he's kind of wearing a cardigan or something, but it starts to almost look like a bulletproof vest. So I like that about it as well. And then actually I think I dropped the number of colors down because I didn't love some of the colors that were coming through with the 14 default. I will tell you that when you are looking at the quilt, if there's an area like this area of shine on his nose that you don't like, you can go and pick up the color in here and you can just take it away. If you make a mistake, and that is actually not the exact shade, you just press the back button. Let's try shadow now. I think shadow. Okay, so it was a shadow shade. And so you're able to just touch up a few of those places. And remember, less shading means less pixels, which means it's going to go together quicker as well. So as it stands right now, we're looking at about 1800 pixels. So that's well into the 2500 that I tell people if this is your first pixel quilt, then try and stick below 2500. So the third area that I think people really fall down on after not being objective is that they don't try the filters and they end up with a pixel quilt that's got some quite bright pinks and purples on the face, and it can look a lot better if you try the filters and if you try and smooth everything out. If you're not happy with the image, because what you put in ultimately is what you get out of this, you can use a program like PicMonkey and go in and make changes to the image. PicMonkey is really good because it allows you to like specifically touch up things as well. So if his eyes weren't detailed enough, which I think his eyes are fine, but there is actually an eye brighten tool and you can go in and brighten like the whites of the eyes. If you have an image of a face and that person is smiling, quite often teeth don't read very well on pixel quilts, and so one thing you can do is you can go in to something like PicMonkey and there is actually a teeth whiten tool, which anytime I'm doing a quilt that's got teeth in it, I will take it into PicMonkey and I will whiten those teeth. And quite often I will also use the mascara tool if the eyes aren't standing out enough, and I'll put mascara on. So I'll brighten the eyes, I'll put mascara on. Sometimes if the lips aren't reading very well, there's a lip tint. I'll do that, and then if there's teeth, I'll whiten the teeth. So what you actually end up with sometimes at the end of the process with the image that actually works, it's almost like a drag queen version of that person. They would probably be horrified to see where you had to get to in order for the image to work. But so we've gone from this to that. So I think we've dropped about 1,000 pixels. Like I said, I don't think the background gives this anything extra. And I also don't think that the color either of his clothing or of his face gives it anything extra. So when you get to the point that you're like, I think I'm happy with this quilt, you just need to go ahead and check the number of pieces. So like I said, you can reduce the number of pieces by getting rid of the background or cropping the image so that you put in a lot of negative space. The only difference between buying a medium pattern and a large pattern is the pixel size. So medium-sized pixel quilts, the smallest pixel will be 1.25 inches. The smallest pixel on the large will be 1.5 inches. So when you're happy, you can go through and you pay your $15, and then what it produces at the end is this. It will give you a pattern. And the front page of the pattern is basically the overview of what your quilt's going to look like. And then this is the page that you really need to pay attention to. So it says what fabric line you've bought the pattern in, and then it's telling you all of the shades that you need to buy and exactly how much of each you need to buy. Before you start a pixel quilt, you need to know which way you want to put it together. So there's something called group cutting, which is where this system blocks like colors together. So on the pattern, you can see that there's areas that are big pieces because they're all the same color. So what that means with group cutting is that you will have all the instructions here. So of the white, you'd cut all of these different sizes and tick them all off as you go. And so that will mean you'll have less pieces to put together overall. Every pixel quilt, if you were going to cut every pixel, it would be 6,912 pixels, which is rather a lot. But if you're doing the group cutting, then obviously you're not going to be cutting anywhere near as much as that. However, some people prefer that they do want to cut every pixel. And when people want to cut every pixel, the main thing I suggest to them is that you get a pixel grid. So that is the interfacing that's got the grid on it. And basically you follow the pattern exactly as you did before, but instead of having larger blocks of color, you would just put individual pixels in that place. So the only company that actually produces a pixel grid for the 1.25 inch pixel quilt, which is my medium-sized quilt, is a company called QuiltSmart, quiltsmart.com. That if you're doing a large quilt, there are a lot of companies that produce the 1.5 inch, but the medium is only QuiltSmart that does a grid like that. And when you use the grid, you cut out all your pixels, you follow the pattern, and then you put them all on, and then you're gonna press them all down because it's an interfacing and it will stick to it. And at the point that they're all pressed down is you then move in rows and you sew in strips. So some people like that process a little bit more. I will say you're going to be buying more yardage if you're cutting every pixel, just because it's going to take more fabric. But you need to know this before you order the fabric, because in this main page you'll see that if you're group cutting, this is how much fabric you need to be, and if you're cutting each pixel, this is how much fabric you need to be. So it's definitely something you need to know in advance. Once you're ready to start cutting, if you're group cutting, you just go ahead and follow all of these directions. If you're cutting every pixel, it's just this final number at the end in bold that you'll need to know. So you would cut 139 1.25 inch pixels out of ash. If you're a bit worried about whether it's all going to fit onto the fabric, whether you'll get all the pieces out of it, there is actually a resource at the end of each pattern that shows you these other pieces and how they fit on. The yardage is generous, so even if you make a mistake, you're not going to run out of fabric. And this is just one way that it will fit on the fabric. There's probably 50 different ways. So you've cut all your pieces, you're ready to go. What next? Well, each quilt is broken down into 108 blocks, and that is 9 blocks across by 12 blocks down. So each page of blocks has 9 directions for 9 blocks in it. So if we go to page 1, it'll be really easy because it's just plain blocks. Super easy row, that one. Let's go to page 2. So this, you collect all of your pieces. I actually will have 9 folders that I will collect all of the pieces for a whole row, and then I will sit down with that next to me at my sewing machine, and at that point I know, I've got a few hours that it's going to take me to sew through all of these, and I'll get a whole row ready, and I always attach that row to the one above it. So when you're creating it, that page of 9 blocks is going to be one entire row. So the hardest part of a pixel quilt is the first 3 rows. After you get past that, you can kind of see what it's starting to be, but those first 3 are pretty tricky. I do recommend that you take a photograph of every row because then you can see it coming together. There's also something about a photograph that means that you will be able to see if there's an error really easily through through a lens than you ever will just looking at it. When you're working on something like this, you're looking so closely at it you can't see the bigger picture. So after every row, I will take a photo, and usually at that point I'll get to see if I've made a mistake or not. So that is the process of pixel quilts. I mean, I do want to definitely reiterate that your image choice is key. You can't hit this with a very low res bad image and expect to get a good quilt out of it. You need the highest resolution image possible. There's only one time that isn't the case, and that is if you are using a black and white or a sepia image. There is something about older images that literally just works with a pixel quilt. I think it is the lower detail. I think that is the reason. So I'm going to show you a black and white image right now of a quilt that I was working on for a lady, and I'll show you real quick the process I went through and how you can see the difference when it comes to black and white images. So this is her. What a cutie. And I am just going to send to her for the purpose of this. Now you can see on this image there's actually areas of scratching and discoloration. When you're trying to get the black and white image into the system, the best thing you can do is scan it in at the highest resolution possible. If you're not prepared to do that, or you just want to try it and see if it's going to work, then definitely take a picture over the image. Just make sure there's no bright light shining on it or anything like that, because that will ruin the detail. So when I was given this image, I thought, oh, it's really not going to work. When it drops in and it's kind of defaulting to Kona at 14 colors, it really looked like it doesn't work. So then I went through and I was like, okay, well, let's try some of the different filters. Nope. Grayscale didn't make a difference. I know I don't want pink or blue. Let's try the warm, see if that makes a difference. Terrible. So at this point, I'm thinking, you know what? I don't think this is going to work. I think I'm going to have to go in and change this image in order to get it to work. But before I gave up completely, I thought I will just try the other fabric lines. So like I said, it defaults on Kona, but you can change that to Michael Miller's Cotton Couture. And there's also Moda Bella solids loaded in there. I'm also loading in Riley Blake's solid fabric line, and I'm hoping that will be updated within the month. So we can see Cotton Couture looks even worse, and I'm like, okay, last ditch effort, let's try Bella solids. Let's see what happens. Boom, it works. For some reason, the shades in Bella solids absolutely work. And so you go from having something that looks terrible, that shouldn't be made into a quilt, into something that looks absolutely beautiful. It's got a high pixel count, this one. It's got 3700, and actually, having played with this image for hours, I know that by taking out the background, it only reduces it by a couple hundred pixels. And I think the reason for that is when you get a black or white or a sepia image, the colors in the background are not going to fight. They're always going to be in the same tones as the face. And actually, I really like this image with the backdrop of the background. I think it anchors it, and I think it gives it some perspective. So for me, if it was me, I would keep the background in this. So the only other part that I haven't spoken to you about, but it's a way of reducing the pixel count, is also a way of giving your quilts a completely different look or feel, is I always work in the high level of detail, the high resolution, but there is the option there that you can drop it down to medium, and the pixels become bigger, and it becomes far more, that's not good. It becomes far more abstract. I'll try it with him as well, just to show you this kind of effect. There you go. But like I said, I always use high. But if you're going for more abstract design, then definitely have a try with that as well. So the website has been tested by over 500 people now, and I've seen over 100 quilts that have been made with it. By being a tester, what does that mean? It just means that you give me feedback if you encounter glitches, you give me feedback if you ever find a partial seam in your pattern. This is all stuff that I need to feedback to the developers and get sorted before the final version launches. But that is my Pixel Quilt 101. This is the exact process I go through every time I design a new Pixel quilt. There is a frequently asked questions section on the website with the most frequent questions I get asked. There is also there's some YouTube videos that I have gone through this process and detailed it, which might answer some questions as well. But honestly, your image choice is the #1 factor. A bad image will not produce a good Pixel quilt. You also need to be objective. And if you're not able to be objective, then go ahead and get someone in that can look at it and be objective for you. And then try every filter, because it may well be just like try every filter and try every fabric line. It may well be just like this little girl, that actually when the default lands and it's Kona and it doesn't work, it will work in Bella. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message or email me, and just go play and have some fun and make some amazing pixel quilts. And I can't wait to see what you do.